No, it is interesting to me that in the universities, the lawyers are not considered teachers. And when you think about what we do in our lives, we're teaching all the time. I mean, we're providing opportunities for students to experience the use of law for clients, and then we're reflecting with them and getting them to think about it, and we think about teaching all the time. I know at my law school, the clinical teachers get together every week for lunch, and most of what we talk about is teaching. Problems we're having with students, how we're teaching particular kinds of things. But the academic faculty never talk about teaching. They talk about their articles, and teaching is sort of like a sideline for them. What they really are there for is to write those articles. I can only report my own experience. For the first 20 years, we were like a legal aid office hanging on the outside of the law school. We were doing lots of teaching. Students were lined up to get into the clinics. They wanted to do it. And the academic faculty had no knowledge of what we were doing. And everything was negotiated between whoever was the director of the clinic at that time and the dean. And when Guido Calabresi became the dean of the law school, he said, this is not acceptable. You're doing a lot of teaching. You have lots of students. We're giving lots of credit to students for being in the clinic. We need to take you off the side of the building and bring you inside. And I was then the director of the clinic. I said, Guido, don't do that. If they find out the cases we're doing, they're going to try to stop what we're doing. They're going to be upset. And he said, you're wrong. And he was right, that he brought the clinic into the law school, made it part of the law school budget instead of having a separate budget, made appointments of lawyers to the clinic, clinical instructors, go through an appointments process the way academics did, and he had created a clinical faculty subcommittee of the faculty appointments committee, and they had members of the appointments committee and people from the clinic, and he developed a real process, and he had the whole faculty voting on appointments to the clinic. And at first the whole faculty had no interest in it at all, and then they became increasingly more interested, and now, 20 years into the revolution that Guido created, it's taken for granted that appointments to the clinical faculty are appointments to the faculty, even though they're different kind of appointments. But it took us a long time, and it took a charismatic dean. Yeah, but it also took a charismatic dean who was willing to use up a lot of his own capital to make it happen. And law school deans in America don't have the power that deans in Israel do. Law school deans don't have power in appointments. So that by this reform, it's the faculty that votes, and the dean does not have great influence in the appointments process. Only in the clinics did the deans have total power, and Guido wanted to give that up and hand it over to the faculty, and needless to say, it made us very nervous, but it ended up working and being right. So that's one way for it to happen, but it seems to me that without the support of a dean who wants that to happen, it's not going to happen. And that's true at the Michlelot as well. Right. The advantage that you have is you have Amichai, who really knows about clinics and supports it. Yeah. He supports it we were talking before. He supports it very strongly. The fact is that at the universities, if you don't have a doctorate, you're not a member of the teaching faculty. And that's just, that's not the university's fault. That's the Council on Higher Education, or however. That's the tradition here in Israel. And it's primarily, I think, because people with only a law degree here have only a first degree. My question to you is, how can you make this happen, accepting the fact that the director of a clinic has to be a member of the academic faculty? The only reason I did it for 10 years is because everybody else refused to do it.
And I understand why.
Right. But I was, for those 10 years, I was handling a full load of students and a full caseload. It was just in addition. In addition, I had to worry about the budget and deal with the dean. And what we want to do is to continue to do what we do, and to be paid an appropriate salary, and to have job security, and to have an opportunity for promotion. I don't want to go to those faculty meetings as a member of faculty and discuss. I don't want to go to them. There's a joke in the United States. Why are law school faculty meetings so acrimonious, so bitter? And the answer is because there's so little at stake. For us, there's a lot at stake, So I don't want to be really, I want to have job security. I want to have a good salary. I want to have room for promotion. I want to be able to say, this is my career. I'm a clinical teacher. But I don't want to, I do not care that I don't, I mean, I can go to those meetings. I don't, because they're, I've been to too many of them, and they're awful. I don't want to be. So, but it's a reality here, at least in the universities, that if you're not an academic, but there are ways of getting around that. You could have an academic director and a clinic director could be one of the clinicians who's overseeing the work of the clinic, and the academic director is just a bridge to the faculty. I mean, you have to think of ways of working around that problem. You don't have it at the IDC, I don't think. You have to ask yourself, what's important to me? If you're saying what's important to me is the students, the clients, and the work we're doing, and that I have some job security and a decent salary, that's one thing. If you say, I want to be a full-fledged member of the faculty of this university, then that's a different question. Maybe we can move back to the other two issues that I was raising. What should we be teaching and how should we be teaching it? I don't think it's our function to sit in a library and do research-based theoretical writing. I think that I think we should write, if we want to, about what we're doing. And different models and different issues like that. So if you say, I reject that distinction between academic and non-academic. It's different kinds of teaching. You know, we teach, we really care about teaching, and we do a different kind of teaching than they do. And we don't want to spend our lives sitting in the library researching theoretical articles. You know, when we write, we want to write about something that we feel the need. We need to write this and get it out there so people know what we're doing. I mean, Aviad should, he left already. His
class is here.
Yeah, but the fact that he started a legislative advocacy clinic is very interesting. And,
it's even more interesting because it's with a Jewish perspective.
Yeah, right.
Perspective.
Mm-hmm. So there is a magazine, you know about Mispat. There's a magazine in which you can write stuff. It doesn't have to be 100 pages long with 1,000 footnotes. It can just be writing. And we should be doing that. I think we should be doing that. In our law school, we're not required to write, but we're in the clinics, but we're encouraged to. And if we want to do it, we can get student teaching research assistants. And I like to do my own. I don't want anybody doing my research anyway. But so that was one issue: vocabulary, academic, non-academic, instead of just saying teaching, and scholarship versus writing. What was the second thing that you were
The mandatory?
Mandatory clinics. So that's another debate in the United States. Should clinics be made mandatory? Some law schools have mandatory clinics, and I hear complaints from my friends who teach in those clinics that every semester, every year, they have 3 or 4 students who really don't want to be there, who hate poor people, who hate the clients, who don't want to do the work. Who are disruptive in class, who are cynical, who say things that are just racist or outrageous, and they say, I wish I didn't have to have those students in the clinic. Part of me says, those students who really hate poor people, they're the ones who need this, and they're the teaching challenge for us. How can we help them grow and expand and open their minds and have a transformative experience in the clinic? On the other hand, that means you have to spend time with them. You know, so we don't have mandatory clinics. We use a lottery for people who apply. We don't interview people for the clinics. I mean, so everybody has an equal chance to get into every clinic.
You don't interview?
Nope.
So how do you?
A lottery. We have people sign up, and then we use a lottery.
That's the way the courses were in Bara. It's still that way?
The reason we do that is we think that every student, it's an issue of democratic process, that we think every student who's paying tuition and coming to the law school should have an equal chance to take a clinic, but they shouldn't be required to take a clinic.
No,
but my students have had 4 years of college. This is not their first educational experience, and that may make a difference. Okay. But you do. And then the next step of the argument is the students who are very good naturally, who just are good with people and they can just meet a client and do a good job of interviewing and working with, don't need very much from me. And I'm a terrific teacher for students like that. For students who are really awkward and cross-examine clients and don't listen and have poor judgment, I'm not that great a teacher. One of the reasons we don't have year-long clinics is because we decided that we wanted to make clinics universally available so that any student in the law school who wants to take a clinic can take a clinic sometime in law school, not necessarily the clinic they choose, but a clinic. In order to do that, we have to have clinics, in theory, be semester long, and a few of them are a year long. But many students do it for more than a semester, even though that was their first enrollment. But once they've been through the basic clinic and have had the classes and the instruction, it's much easier to work with them because then they're just working on cases and they're also helping new students. We often pair students who have been through the clinic with new students, so they are partners together working on cases, so the students learn from each other as well as whatever they can learn from me, which is probably not that much. We start in the first year. Second semester of the first year, we have no prerequisites. We think that what students learn in academic courses is of almost no help to them in the clinics. They need that first semester. Our first semester is torts, contracts, civil procedure, and constitutional law. So we're doing civil practice, constitutional law, torts, and contracts in the clinics. So they have the basic courses. And then sometime during law school they have to take criminal law, and sometime they have to do a course in ethics, but working in the clinics constitutes meeting the ethics requirement. So they have a lot of choices. So in the spring semester we take half of the first year class into the clinic. And what's great about first year law students is that they still have some idea that law is about justice, and they've not yet, and the academic faculty hasn't yet made them cynical. So I love first year students. They're my favorites. Because they still are naive and their eyes are open and their hearts are still open to the clients. And so we do something to students in law school. They get worse and worse as the years go by. They become more cynical, more mercenary. This is about making money more, they forget that they had some idea about justice. Some students more than others. Some students come to law school doing it, less about justice. And I always tell those students, you want to make money, go to business school. Don't go to law school. Law school's not the place for that. But I don't know why they think that I'm judging them for what they're doing, because I'm really not. Mandatory clinics, which is that all students need it, especially those who think they don't. I don't want to work with them. But students who hate the clients and don't want to be in the clinic and are only doing it because they have to can really be disruptive. You spend a lot of time arguing with them, trying to get them to shut up in class. And
I have to say that from my experience, I've worked at the College of Management, which is not mandatory, and I had interviews before I chose the students. Yeah. I still had these 3 or 4 students that I wish they weren't there. And in Bar-Ilan it's like the same, even though it's mandatory, so I don't see the difference at all. Right.
It's good to have more information than less about students coming in, but predictions are very uncertain about how students will do. We once had a student who came into the clinic who had been a Benedictine monk, and he finally came to the law school because he said, I spent the last 10 years lying on the stone floor praying, and the world didn't get better. I want to make the world better. And he was a terrible clinic student. What he really wanted to do was get out of that whole monk business and go to Wall Street and make a lot of money. And we had said, this is going to be the best student we ever had in the clinic. It's very hard. So I agree with you, it's hard to predict. But obviously, if you have more information, you make better decisions about admitting students. And in the early years, we did use interviews and had people write statements about why they wanted to do the clinics and so forth. And then it became a political discussion about whether that's really a democratic process. It is in a way, but it's an elitist democratic process. You're looking for people with the most potential rather than the people who maybe want it and need it the most. So we have one clinic in which we have a clinic in which all of our clients speak Spanish. It's legal services for immigrant communities, and it's another clinic of mine, and we go out into an immigrant community in New Haven, a low income, and all of the clients speak Spanish. And so we give preference to students who are fluent in Spanish.
Do you have enough? Yeah, well, Spanish is common. It's not like here that we need like Arabic and Russian, and we don't have Amharic, and we don't have students who are coming in as volunteers.
But each semester we have a couple of students who don't speak Spanish, and the other students translate, serve as interpreters. So serving as an interpreter is also a learning process. But you could tell from the clients that when the student is interviewing them in English and it's being translated by the student who speaks Spanish, the clients are talking only to the Spanish speaking and also having private conversations and so forth. And when the student is a native Spanish speaker, you can see the clients who come in very nervous because all of them are undocumented and all of them are very nervous about getting deported. And when the student starts speaking to them in fluent Spanish, you can see their shoulders relax and they just relax. Say, someone who knows my language, knows my life, knows me. So it makes a difference.
We don't see ourselves as one of concerning only social justice, but mainly educating people of becoming barristers in future countries.
I would only add to that, they can learn those skills representing poor people.
Yes, sure.
So but that's giving poor people access to the legal system, and that's the social justice piece of what you're doing. So the question is, what's the purpose of the clinic? Is the purpose of the clinic to teach litigation skills or to afford access to justice for poor people by using litigation? And in order to do that, you have to learn litigation skills, which is kind of how I think about it. I also teach trial advocacy because I think that there are fewer and fewer trials in the United States. We have alternative dispute resolution and mediation and arbitration, and so there aren't a lot of trials. But in order to do litigation, even if the case is eventually going to settle, you have to not be afraid to go to trial. So I teach trial advocacy, and we do get trials. I mean, we are in our immigration court. Those are adversary proceedings, and we try those cases. Students try the cases. I mean, obviously, I spend a lot of time with them preparing them to do it and sit at the table with them and pass them notes, but they're doing it. You're not just teaching litigation, because you could teach litigation representing clients who could afford lawyers as well, and they might prefer to have a law school person representing them. They might think it looks better, so I think they're both. Here's what we've done at my law school. We've taken a poll of graduates of the law school 5 years after they graduate, and we've done it for three different classes. 5 years out. And one of the questions we ask is, what kind of practice are you in? Are you in a public interest practice or in a private law firm or in government? If you're in a private law firm, do you do pro bono? And if you do pro bono or if you're in a public interest work, was there anything in law school that encouraged you or helped you to do that? And almost 100% of students, of graduates who have done that say it was the clinics. Now, we have no control group. If I were a social scientist or a statistician, I would say that your anecdotal experience doesn't tell us very much. That we really need to think of ways of doing regression analysis and random studies and so forth to find out. I also think that similarly, even though our 3 Yale studies were more systematic, and we talked to all the alumni and got very high return rate on them. Even that, we don't have ways of controlling all of the variables. We don't know whether we're having an effect or not. I would like to think that the student experience in the clinics leads them to do some good in their life and not just make money. I would like to think that it's because of me and not just because of the fact that they did the work. I would like to think that some of it comes from the teaching. If you walk into a poor neighborhood with students who have never been in one, they look at it, but they miss a lot. They don't see everything, and they don't ask themselves the questions they ought to be asking. And that's our role as teachers, not just offering them the experience, but helping them to think and reflect about it and to perhaps point things out that they might not see when they enter a world in which they have not been before and have no experience with. We're not very good at collecting data and measuring this stuff. Because you say, what would I rather do? Work with a student on a case for a client or start collecting data and analyzing it? And so I end up not. Many of my former students, if they do a pro bono case, even though they're working in a large corporate law firm, will send me an email or call me to let me know that they're doing it, because I don't. And I love to hear from them, I really, and to encourage them to do more and to ask them about the cases. But we really haven't measured that. That's another thing that's going on in the United States now. There's a movement to try to measure the effectiveness of student work for clients, and also the impact on students in doing it. There's an article about to come out in the Yale Law Journal that's written by a Harvard law professor and a statistician about random statistical analysis of the effect of the offer of representation by a law school clinic to people in the first appeal from a denial of unemployment compensation benefits. So first what they've done is they've taken a kind of routine case in which a clinic may have many of them. And then they were able to have a control group because the clinic couldn't take all the cases. So half the people who applied for assistance to the clinic were offered assistance and half were not. And they said that they could not determine whether or not having legal representation made a difference. They don't know whether people who were offered it actually accepted it. All they know is that people who were offered it didn't do any better than people who weren't offered it. Now, they don't know whether people who weren't offered it went to Greater Boston Legal Services rather than to the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau to get representation. So in other words, all they know is one group was offered legal assistance, one group wasn't offered. They don't know whether they eventually found lawyers or whether it made a difference, or whether the fact that the clinic had been doing unemployment compensation appeals for so many years in such a large volume that they affected the system. So now that the hearing officers paid more attention to the law, the denial rate, they didn't measure the denial rate. These are very sophisticated statistical analyses which in my judgment tell us very little. What I learned much more from is listening to your anecdotal stories about lawyers you meet who talk about the effect that being in the clinic had on them. But as social scientists, which we are not, we would say, you know, the study that the Harvard people did of unemployment hearings in the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau is much more valuable than your information, even though it tells us very little. It tells us an awful lot about very little. You've told us an awful lot about very few people, so we don't know. But measurement is important. We never ask our clients how they experienced representation by students. You know, we don't check back with clients and say, were you satisfied with the representation you received from our students in the clinic? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? We never ask clients. But lawyers generally never ask clients what the experience was like. Okay, thank you.